Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to Living in the Limelight, an Anton Scholl and Friends podcast where we discuss music from the artist and fan perspective. Thanks for listening and enjoy the show. Hey, welcome to another episode of Living in the Limelight. I'm your host, Anton Scholl, and with me today, my special guest, Gavin Evick. How are you today?
I'm doing great. I'm excited. How are you?
Good, very good. Yeah, I was listening to some of your stuff. I want to talk about just a little bit of everything because I am intrigued by all the things that you have done, especially at your age. And really, this show is about musicians and how their styles and how they write, how they do. We kind of dig a little bit more into writing style and what people can expect when they come and see your show. So for my audience, I'd like to hear a lot about pretty much how you grew up, where you grew up, and the starting influence of the style of music that you're into.
Okay. So it was how and where first. So, I mean, how I grew up, I grew up a lot of the time, my parents were divorced and my dad, was the guitarist for Bret Michaels. And when I would be with my dad, all I would want to do is just go on the road with him and Bret. And a lot of my childhood was, going on the road with him and Bret. One of my favorite places, as we're talking where you live, Cave Creek. I love the Arizona area because Bret lived in Scottsdale, right by kind of Cave Creek. That's not too far, right? They're pretty close.
Right, correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just go traveling with him, seeing the world and kind of growing up. This is important in the music industry, not just kind of being a fan of the music, but growing up behind the scenes, and just kind of learning how the industry works from these different perspectives. And then also when I'd be home with my mom, obviously normal school. I grew up in Northern Virginia, Centerville, Virginia, or Fairfax, Virginia, to be specific. And Virginia, itself is such a funny place because it's right outside of Northern Virginia, is right outside of D.C. So it's very political, very dense, very city. And then 15 minutes south, you got the South basically. You got just farmland and southernness and all that. So I grew up kind of all walks of life, if that makes sense. Being on the road, with my dad, living a normal school life, being a varsity athlete there, being by the city, being by the South, just kind of everything, So that's kind of how I grew up. And then
how old were you at that time when you're hitting the road? So you're hitting the road with your dad and Bret Michaels, but how old were you at that time when you were doing that?
Zero.
Zero.
I mean, it's hard to pinpoint. I mean, a lot of it was kind of local when I was young, but I guess when you could say the real traveling started is when I was getting kind of late elementary school, maybe early middle school. In fact, I think the first time I went out to Arizona, I was in 7th or 8th grade, spring break. And yeah, just kind of around then. And then every summer, every spring break, I'd always want to, go on tour with my dad. And that's what I would do when I'd be allowed to. Yeah.
Right. So you kind of had that. I assume you would either be backstage somewhere close, as a young kid, and you were able to see this style of music coming out and being on the road with that style of music kind of in your blood, in your veins, hearing it all the time. That had to be a huge influence on, like, at what point in time do you remember sitting there or standing there watching them and then you said that's what I want to do?
Couple moments, I love the music, but I didn't really fall in love with it until late into high school, like junior, senior year. But I tell this all the time, growing up and kind of, like you said, kind of being backstage or doing this or that. I knew a lot of like these people as my dad's like good friends, more so than before I knew their music. Like Eric Brittenham of Cinderella. You know, he's like an uncle. You know, he was one of my dad's best friends. You know, for the longest time, he was just, I guess you could say Uncle Eric, or you could say Uncle Brett Michaels. And then I knew all these people before I knew their music. I'm like, oh wait, so this song is by Eric. Okay, that's cool. And it's like that's kind of how I got introduced to it, is I would know the people on a personal level before I would know their music. You know, I got into Cinderella because I wanted to hear what Eric Brittenham's music was like, more so than discovering it on its own. You know, but then I got kind of, you know, high school, like junior year is when I really got, you know, more into it and kind of, you know, falling in love with just the not just the songs, but the idea of it. You know, I come from a generation where everybody, you know, we take like mental health days at school. We have this, we have that. You know, it's like we have 8th place trophies. We kind of normalize. How do I say this? You know, normalize being that it's okay to be sad or this or that. You know, and it's I was a varsity wrestler in high school, and that taught me a whole lot, because what you learn is you could be down 10 points and getting your ass kicked, and you don't ever give up, and you don't ever, match is never over until the whistle blows. So I apply that in life, and then I realized that I find that similarity in a lot of the 80s rock, because it's all about having a good time. It's all about like nothing but a good time is all, oh, you're having a shitty day or work sucks. You know, we're going to have nothing but a good time. It's all about kind of taking those bad feelings, suppressing them, and kind of overcoming them. And that's really where I fell in love with just the idea of, not just the idea, but like the ideologue, whatever it is, the word is, but of just the music, and just kind of being like, let's focus on the good stuff. I like singing and about having a good time. I don't like, you know, a lot of the 90s grunge stuff about just idolizing depression and all that stuff. That's what I say. A lot of people disagree with that. So that's kind of where I fell in love with the music, is right around there.
Right.
That makes
and I could see that. I mean, a lot of people that were born after 2000 or in the year 2000, in the 2000s, they definitely have a different ideology and different ways of thinking about things. And a lot of it is more of, a lot of people think that they are kind of entitled to certain things, and that you had to kind of work for everything that you had. So it's really, to see you skip an entire generation and not even go back to the 90s. You went back to the 80s, so I think that's interesting, because, to me, the music at that time, the 70s and the 80s were the time for music. I think that's when the best songs ever, have come out. And that's when music was music, and there wasn't all this electronic stuff and all of these people that are, when synthesizers came out in the 80s, it was, it was like, wow, what's happening? This is changing, rock music kind of kept it to where it was like background music, background addition to a song, but then everything just became completely in the late 90s and 2000s, everything became completely synthesized, and it kind of took away from what music actually is.
I mean, specifically, man, I mean, it's funny. I'm trying to help my girlfriend's younger sister is really getting into music, but more kind of pop stuff. She loves Taylor Swift and like Sabrina Carpenter and all that stuff. And she has a show coming up that I'm trying to help her with. And just literally today, she wanted to do like a Sabrina Carpenter song for her show that's in 2 months. And I went onto this website that I use for my live shows. We have like a 5 to 6 piece band most of the time. And when I have a keyboard player, I really got to make sure that he's doing the right sound. So it's like sometimes we might do Still the Night, and there's like 3 different sounds on that song. And when you only have 1 or 2 keyboards, you got to make sure that they have the right sound. So I use this website. It's like karaokebackingtrack.com to really isolate the different tracks. And a lot of the songs will have like 8 different things going on. Yeah. But you only have 1 keyboard player. Then I listened to the Sabrina Carpenter song, and it had like 18 tracks, and 6 of them were these different synths being played at the exact same time, just doing all
Yeah.
these different things. And it's like, you can't do that live. I understand like some 80 songs that have synth, they have a synth, but your keyboard player can play that part and it's still an
Yeah.
instrument. You can't do any of this modern pop stuff live. You need like 8 keyboard players to do all this stuff. And that's where I
Right.
kind of draw the line, because when you do a song that requires you need to have backing tracks, I'm not a big backing track guy. I won't do that. If we're doing a song that requires synth, my keyboard player is going to do it himself.
Yeah. Yeah. And which is good, because bringing back live music, I mean, that's something that I started to do when I was doing my original music. And, you know, my whole thing was bring back the electric guitar and bring back the guitar solo. You know, I wanted to be basically back to basics. And when I'm watching your stuff, I'm thinking, well, that's exactly the same thing that you're doing now, you know, many years later. And I think that that's great to bring back actual music, actual live music, actual writing, instead of just going in a studio and making beats and then singing along with it or rapping along with it or doing something like that. You know, I appreciate that type of music, and the fact that you're bringing that back is, you know, I love that. So kudos to you for doing that.
Thank
So now I want to talk about, so you came out with a song on your own called Favorite Songs.
Yes.
And so tell me how the writing of that came about.
Yeah, me and my dad wrote that together because I didn't really know how to write a song. I had this idea that I wanted to get out, and I was having a hard time communicating it. So I would give this idea, like, I want it to sound like this, and I want the story to be about this. In the first verse, my dad was showing me, okay, this is how you take an idea and write it into lyrics, you know? And then by the time the second verse came around, I'm like, okay, now I know how to do this. I mean, everybody thinks that they can kind of write lyrics, but it doesn't always.
Right.
It doesn't always work. Sometimes it's very kind of tongue in cheek. And I'm like, this is the idea I have. I always start a song with an idea, and then I try to figure out how to visualize that idea, and then how to write lyrics with that idea that I visualized.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like favorite songs is, you know, I was kind of tired of, you know, love songs that are almost kind of break up and kind of depressing, if that makes sense. And I'm like, you know what, let's this was around, I was probably 18, 19 writing this song. It was kind of the first time I was experiencing kind of not one night stands, if that makes sense. Like, you know, hanging out with a girl and kind of catching feelings and stuff like that.
Sure.
And I was like, this is such a unique feeling, and it's such a cool feeling that I want to write a song about it. And it's like, it's this thing that you've never experienced. Like, what, like Van Halen, why can't this be love? Or Love Walks In. It's like, it's what's the chorus to why can't this be love? How do I know when it's love? No, it's when it's love. How do I know when it's love? I can't tell you, but it lasts forever. Or it's just this feeling, or something like that. I'm like, I want to write about that feeling. It's this indescribable feeling. And it's like, some of the first verse gets a little weird, but it's like, such a long time I didn't think love was real. Just one of those things that other people feel like it's made up in a movie. And it just, the chorus is about hanging out with a girl and driving all night and kind of getting lost in time. I don't know. Did you listen to the song you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. The chorus is totally about, you know, you're hanging out with this girl and time goes by. You don't realize how long time lasts. It's about driving in the middle of the night, and you're turning on your favorite songs. You're driving all night. That's right, across the state line, and then you just end up, like I said, losing track of time, and you cross the state line. You don't even realize it, and you know the sun's coming up, and you didn't realize it's been that long. But it doesn't matter, because you're just trapped in this moment. The whole thing is about immersion and being kind of trapped in that moment, because it's just, the whole world doesn't exist. It's just you and her, and you're singing your favorite songs. You know, not a whole lot of people really kind of get the message about that song. It's about kind of being trapped in a moment and forgetting the outside world exists. You're just driving it. It's been 8 hours at this point.
Yeah.
You know, that's what the song is about. But about the writing process of that song, I was just learning how to sing at that point. I was taking online vocal lessons from this guy named Tony Harnell. He was the lead singer of a band called TNT, and he filled in for Skid Row for a little bit. And when we were doing favorite songs in the studio, it was almost like I was learning how to sing while making that song. And we used, you create songs, right? So, I could get into producing stuff and you'd understand.
Right.
You know the program Melodyne?
Yeah.
So a lot of times we would use that, and I would take a track, and my dad we'd have the graph up on the TV, and he would show me, listen, this is how flat you are. This is how sharp you are. We need to get you up here. And that is what helped me with my pitch the most, is actually being able to visualize my notes on a TV. And we would just, I sang that song probably 1,000 times, because every single time I kept getting better, because it's when I learned how to sing, versus if I do a song now, it'll only take me a few tries because I'm such a better singer now than I was. But I wouldn't be the singer I am today if it wasn't for favorite songs, because I learned how to sing while making that song. So it took months, almost a year to make.
Okay, so let me ask you something, because this is interesting to me, because something I found out later in life, when I was singing, because I'm a singer and a bass player.
Yeah.
And so when I was singing, I knew nothing about tuning as far as I always was under the impression that, standard tuning was what everyone did. Everybody tuned the guitar in E, and all I had to do was match the notes on there. But there were certain things I knew that I couldn't do, certain things that were either too low or too high for me. Then I started hearing about people in the recording studio or actual musicians who would have their guitars and basses turned down to E flat.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I thought, that's hard for me to do, because I can't go that low, because I had naturally a higher voice. So that didn't work for me.
Me too. I relate to that.
Yeah. So then, though, and this is funny because I never really heard about this. I had interviewed Rudy Sarzo from Quiet Riot. And in that interview, Rudy says that when they were in Quiet Riot, that Kevin Dubrow, he would come into the studio, and he would have a certain pitch that they would use, like a strobe tuner or some kind of a tuner. And he would come in and he would sing and say, okay, that's my pitch. That's where I am. Now you guys tune around it. So instead of being like a 440 tuning, what's called 440, they would be like 448, or they would be something like that. It would be and I never thought about that. I never thought about the guitars being somewhere in the middle. It's not quite E flat, but yet it's not quite E. But yes, I can see that. And that kind of opened up my eyes to oh, yeah, there are a lot of singers out there that are kind of in between. And, to me, that was genius for them to figure that out and come into the studio and tune to their singer versus the singer trying to hit the notes on the guitar. That kind of blew my head off in that sense. So,
that's an interesting concept. I've never thought of that. I know, not that this is the same thing, but I know that as a singer, sometimes you get a specific pitch for a melody in your head, and sometimes you'll work for hours in a studio with musicians trying to figure out the right key, because they'll write this riff in this key, but that might not go along with your melody. So you'll have the musicians keep changing the key until it matches your melody. And I've heard, I know of that, the instruments, making their key align with your vocals more so than the other way around, but actually tuning the instruments to a singer's pitch is something that's crazy. I've never, and it's weird. It's weird trying to go in between, because it's only a one note difference, and it almost I don't want to say it doesn't make sense, because it's just going in between that. It wouldn't affect the singer's pitch that much, I don't think. But
but it can sound a little bit out, and that's what matters. The singer can sound a little bit out. So if you took an E and the singer was a little bit out from an E, and you just tuned it down a little bit, maybe toward, not quite E flat, it's still going to be, you're still going to tune E, A, D, G, B, E on your guitar, but it's just going to be a little bit off or a little bit high. So it's not going to be, quite F, but it'll be up there, So, I mean, it's interesting. I just never thought of that before. And, it kind of opened up the eyes to like, wow, now a singer, you do struggle sometimes with, God, I can't hit that chorus note. And then I started realizing that all of these bands would use different types of tunings,
Metallica is somewhere kind of in the middle, I believe.
Yeah.
Too.
Initially E and E flat were like the tunings, but then there's, Led Zeppelin. I'm a big Led Zeppelin fan. Led Zeppelin used to use, called DAD-GAD tuning, DAG-GAD tuning on the guitars in certain songs, and then play different chord structures. There's C tuning, there's D tuning, where you're just an open D on the guitar, when you strum all the strings. I mean, there's so many different tunings, but yeah, it was just interesting to note that, yeah, if you do come up, if you do have a song that, seems a little bit odd, just have the guitars tuned to you, and it'll probably be an amazing experience. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept. I do know that in the studio, even Van Halen, that they considered a half step down, but a lot of the times it's whatever tuning Eddie's guitar was in or closest to a half step down, and Michael would just match Eddie's tuning. They wouldn't even try to tune to a certain thing. They would just tune their strings.
Right. Yep. Yeah. So that's interesting. So now when you started out, it was just Gavin Evick. Okay. That was you, but then you decided you were going to do the band.
Yes.
So you got the Gavin Evick band together. Now, when you write the other song, when you write like Young, Wild and Free, a song like that, which is really kind of an anthem, I would say, to your generation, you bring rock and roll with you wherever you go, type of thing. Where, when that came out, tell me the writing difference between that song, and favorite songs.
So it was 50-50, it was kind of the same, but it was slightly different because it was still my creative control, and it was I demoed it with my dad. I still demoed it with my dad, but we would let the rest of my musicians kind of have creative control over their parts. Not necessarily so much the song structure. The song structure remained what me and my dad wrote. But it's like my other guitar player, his name is also Gavin. His name is Gavin Hades. Like it was completely his solo. So we sat down with him and we would kind of, he would play a lick and be like, oh yeah, that's cool, and do this and do that. And, it's his creative control and his solo. He also helped with, some of the lyrics as well. And, my drummer, Steven, he had full creative control on, the drum line too. It was a slightly different drum line before, but, he's more of a metal fan. So he'd throw in a couple triplets here and there on the song. Right. And the process was still creatively, it was still pretty much me and my dad on the song structure. And actually, when it comes to what you would give a writing credit to, and Gavin helped with some of the words. But as far as, like playing the instruments, not, when it's weird when I'm trying to tell you like what's considered like a song credit. It's anything that has to do with the structure of a song. So it's like a drummer or a guitar player don't really get songwriting credits, if that makes sense. It's because they're just, musicians kind of writing the song unless you come up with a chord structure. So it's like they had all creative control on their parts. So especially with this new song that we're about to put out, it's a song called Red Line. Me and Gavin sat down and wrote it together. Instead of me and my dad, it was me and Gavin, and we wrote it. Then we will have, everybody else have their input on it. And this one, I will say that this song is a better example than Young, Wild, and Free, because Young, Wild, and Free was still very much just me and my dad writing that and everybody else kind of playing on it. Yeah. This song is me and my band writing it. And it's a different process because it's like I said, I always have an idea for what song I want it to be, and then I expand off of that idea. This song is about adrenaline. The catch of the song is it's the idea of, like redlining in a car, and kind of, you're going fast but you're taking it beyond the point it could handle, or even like like sound or EQ or any of that, kind of taking it past the red line. It's about kind of living your life on that point. Don't live in this just this bubble. Take it beyond that. That's what the song is about. It's a big adrenaline song. It's a heavy hitter. And we take that, and I did the demo completely. No, I don't say completely myself, but me and Gavin did the demo on my MacBook right here. And then we give it to my dad, and he's like, okay, it's time to produce this. So we all come together and we all do our parts after, and he produces it. If that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, no, absolutely.
With the band.
I think it's, so you're not the one who kind of brings a song into the studio and says, here's the demo. You guys learn the parts. And I'll tell you that, like, the Who was the Who, obviously a great band. Pete Townsend handled all the writing, but the way that Pete Townsend used to demo his songs, that he would play every instrument or have people play all the instruments on the song, play it basically like he would want the song to be played.
Yeah.
And brought it into the guys and said, here's the song, learn it. Okay. Yeah. You sound like you're at least giving creative freedom to a lot of the other members of the band to say, okay, hey, you're the bass player. If you want to add something to that, you go right ahead. Here's the song. Don't stray from what the basics are of the song. But if you want to change the bass around a little bit, or if you want to add a little drum fill here and there, you give them the freedom to do that, correct?
Yeah, of course. Like they will have their creative, touch onto their specific parts. I still am kind of, the one that will create the song structure itself. But they'll do whatever they want. But I will say, Gavin this time, my other guitar player, he wrote the chord progression. I told him what I want the song to be and where it goes, and he's way better about writing chords than I am. I'm not great with figuring out which chord needs to come next in a song.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm giving that to him.
Yeah. Well, no, it's good. It's good to have that songwriting partner that's going to come up with something, and then you can either focus on the lyrics or structure or whatever it is that
Yeah, well, I know, as a singer, I know more music theory than a singer really needs to know, but it not as much as a musician, like an instrument musician should. An instrument musician knows way more about music theory than a singer needs to. So he's way better at that. It's like if I say, okay, wait, it sounds good in this key, then he knows all the chords that go with this key. I still need to look it up and be like, hey, what chords are in G minor or something like that,
Yeah. So I wanted to just bring something up, because we've been talking about this. You've been talking about the influence that your dad has had in the bands, playing around with all of these other bands, a lot of these famous people that you have grown up with, played with. Kind of reminds me of like a wrestler's son growing up, and they grow up with all these famous wrestlers, and then they become a wrestler themselves.
Yes,
it's that kind of a situation. And but I want people to understand also that hard work is really what got you, and talent, of course, got you to where it is. I am sure, and you can certainly tell us if it's right or not. I am sure that there's been times to where your dad was probably a lot harder on you, because he wants you to be successful and not just say, oh yes, yeah, Gavin, that's great, go ahead and do that. You know what I mean? Like there's got to be some stuff to where he's saying, no, don't, no, I don't, that ain't good. Don't do that. Because, whenever you have somebody who's that influential or that well-known, who has produced and has done stuff, they're probably going to be they're not just lenient on their kids and giving them favoritism or nepotism to get out there and do stuff, So I'm sure, have you had that experience?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, nobody knows what goes on behind the scenes. My dad's my number one big supporter, but he will be the first person to tell me what I need to do to improve and what I did wrong. A lot of people, in my band will talk about it, my other parents, or not my other parents, my other, band members' parents will even say, this or that, people in the world especially with their kid, I'm not talking about my band, will just be, act like their kid kind of shit's gold. And, if they do something, oh my God, they're so fucking amazing. We gotta be realistic. If I did good, that's not what I want to fucking hear. I don't want to hear how well I hit the high note in Still of the Night. I want to hear how bad my pitch was on this song or that song. I want to know what the fuck I can do to get better.
Yeah.
And it's exactly what my dad does. He doesn't blow smoke up my ass and act like everything I touch is gold. He tells me what I need to do to get better. And that's what you fucking need in anything. And that is what my generation is lacking, is people that are not saying that my dad is hard on me, but people that, beat it into you and, what you need to do better. You will never have a perfect show. This is what you need to do to get up to that, or close as you can to a perfect show.
Yeah. And especially, they're not going to want to put you out there and have you, back up any of these bands that are so well known or that they know and have them look bad. You wouldn't get this position if you weren't as good as you are.
I represent, man. I everything I say and do represents my dad, and that goes back and represents Brett Michaels as well. I got that. I've learned that the hard way too. Everything gets back.
Right. Oh yeah, no, for sure. And it's definitely not easy. I mean, because on the same side of that, you are also trying to push to make sure that because you're representing them, you're not going to do anything to make them look bad. So it obviously puts a lot of pressure on you also.
Yeah.
So which is good, because that pressure can only make you better, right?
Of course, it will only make you better. I mean, that's why I, wish every kid out there, especially my age, would go and do a sport or a dirty sport, or just something that just where you get your ass kicked. I mean, I could say it a million times how much, kind of wrestling kind of changed my life. It's like you get beaten and beaten and beaten, and you learn, it's like, I'm not trying to make a joke out of this, but like even in Talladega Nights, if you ain't first, you're last. It's that. You don't strive for 8th place. In my generation, we give out 8th place trophies. You keep striving to be the best, and when you're the best, go even fucking further.
Exactly.
It's we have such, a thing about, oh, that's good enough. I don't like the term good enough.
Yeah.
Always try to be better than you could possibly imagine. And it's like, going back to wrestling, you get beat and beat and beat, but you keep standing up. You don't just say like, oh, I tried my best, but I lost. You lost because you didn't try hard enough. And I apply that to everything in life. If I don't make it in the music industry, it's because I did not try hard enough. It's not because the world did me wrong, because I didn't try hard enough.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that is refreshing to hear, believe me. So let me talk about this, because obviously, you have been out there, playing with some of these bands. Who are some of the bands that you have played with?
Who have I not played with? It's easier. We did, Night Ranger, obviously, Brett Michaels band, Warrant, Lita Ford, Firehouse, Lynch Mob. Then those are all solo shows. Then we did, we played a festival down in Key West that had like everybody, like your Tom Kiefers, your Bretts, your Stone Temple Pilots, not Jackal, Buck Cherry, just all of them. We play with a lot of the ones in that kind of circuit.
Yeah. So, and that obviously is kind of, when you see the differences in how these bands play and what they do, I'm assuming that inspires you even more to keep doing what you're doing, and to, I mean, that's knowledge, seeing what you're seeing out there, getting that type of experience. It's like you're being taught by the best, because they were at it, at the time, to where it was new. They came up with that style. They came up with that way of playing, and you're learning from all of them. So I can only imagine that's making you better each time you play.
So I got 2 answers to that. 2 very different answers. So which one should I say first? I will say, watch it on your comment about watching them and, having it inspire me, to do this or do, something better. it's a combination, because it inspires me, but it also can anger me sometimes because they're so good. You can't beat 40 years of experience. And anybody will tell you, I got a really, really good band behind me. We do really good things, but we don't have 40 years of experience. So it's like, I'll watch this band or I'll watch Night Ranger do this and that, and I'm like, fuck, back to the drawing board. We need to do this better. We need to do this. I'm so fucking hard on my band, and sometimes I feel bad about it, and sometimes I feel sorry because they're all great musicians. They're all great musicians, and this is nowhere near putting them down. My band is great, but it's just funny sometimes going to see this show or that show, and it's like, back to the drawing board, man. This is how we need to do this better. This is how we get this tighter. Because that's what I do when I watch shows. I enjoy them, but I also sit there and like, okay, that was fucking amazing. Let me do that better. This part of that part. So that's kind of my answer about it inspiring me. It inspires me, and it lights a fire under my ass when I see a band that's so good.
Yeah.
But my other answer is, you said something along the lines of, I forgot how you said it, but when I watch these guys and I know how experienced they are and how amazing they are, and they laid out the blueprint for how to do these things, it opened my eyes one time when I opened for Kicks. We opened for Kicks, and out here they're really big. I know out west they'll do like bars and stuff, but out here in Kicks plays like massive venues, and it was our first big show in our careers, 1,200 people, and I just thought to myself, we can be as good as we can possibly be, but no matter how good you are, there's no beating 40 years of experience. So these are all great musicians. No matter how good we are, they've got 40 years on us. So what can we do to be near that level? We have to focus on our youth and adrenaline, because that's the one thing they don't have. And I will say that Steve Whiteman is still very energetic, but I learned that day, we got to be a good fucking really tight band, but I got to run laps around all these bands that we play with. I got to make sure that I have triple the energy as them, because these people that are coming to see them are coming to see them and not us. So I got to make sure I put on a really, really, really good show. Right. And the one thing that I have, because of my age, over most of these bands we play with, is my energy.
Yeah.
So if you come see us play, I am walking off that stage drenched in sweat, whether it's a 30-minute set or an hour and a half. I'm going to be drenched in sweat because I'm going to give it everything I have. I cannot stand still during a show because that is just so boring, and I hate that.
For sure. Well, yeah, you have to put on a show.
Yeah. So that's what we capitalize on is, although we're a really tight band, we capitalize on the fact that, we got more energy naturally because we're younger. That's not me downing any other band. It's just we're younger. We have more energy.
Right. So let me ask you this. Where do you see yourself now, understanding where you're at now? Okay. You talked about 40 years experience.
Uh-huh.
In another 20 years, the bands that you've grown up with, the bands that you've been playing with, are all pretty much going to be retired or gone.
Yes.
They're just not going to be around anymore.
Uh-huh.
You'll be in that era then, 20 years later. Where do you see yourself going, and where do you see the music scene going?
Oh, that's hard. That's really hard. Where do I see the music scene going? I'm hoping that there's still a need for live music. Can you hear my dog, by the way?
Yeah.
You can?
That's all right.
Let me fix my phone. Please interview, please help. Where do I see the music scene going? It could go, a couple ways. You're right about everybody's going to be retiring in the next 10-ish years, of my genre. So that could do a couple things for me. The genre could possibly die, or it could create a need for musicians like me that are carrying on the torch. And that's something I'm leaning towards, is that there's a need for the David Lee Roth of my generation. There's a need for the Motley Crue, the Van Halen, the Metallica, or whoever it is of my generation. And that's where I'm hoping it can go, is people in my generation that love that type of music don't want to, if they can't see their favorite bands, a legacy band, then that creates more of a need, more of a demand for people to step, into those shoes and fill that role. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, for sure. And that's what I was kind of hoping you would say, because it's really where I hope it goes is people like you that continue to do this style of music. It will create that need, and it will get rid of, or maybe push back, a lot of the electronic music or the producer type music that's out there, where real musicians will get out there and play and showcase their talent. So, I mean, I just hope it continues. I hope that your style of music, what you're bringing remains, instead of it just, it almost died in the 90s, and then it started to make a comeback. And I'm really hoping that, bands like yourself, and I know I tried to do that myself years ago with bringing back the guitar oriented music again. That I hope that it really continues. Now, let me ask you this. Do you look at music as your, it's what you would want to do for the rest of your life? Meaning that what you're doing right now, if somebody came to you and said, Gavin, look, I'm going to make you a superstar, but you're going to go pop, and I'm going to create the music for you, but you will be a mega millionaire, and you're going to be at the top of the charts, Taylor Swift style.
Oh man. So it's about selling out, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
It's hard because
nothing wrong with it. Just a matter of, I like, kind of like see where you're at and see what, how the music has affected you over the years. And I can see a lot of people doing that, and remember, back in the day, nobody wrote their own music. You're talking about back in the day of Elvis, back in the day of the Brat Pack or the Rat Pack. I mean, with Frank Sinatra, stuff like, none of them wrote their own music. They just sang and played whatever, what people gave them. And of course, their voices is what really got them to where they have to be. But there's a lot of bands out there that, are really just kind of looking for the payoff and the fame. And, that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that if that's the case. It just, where are you in the side of music to where, do you want to do what you're doing, or do you want to follow what music tells you to do?
It's hard because I got into the music because I have a genuine love for rock and roll. As cheesy as it sounds, that's why I'm doing it, is because I love the music I like.
Yeah.
So it's hard to see myself doing anything outside of that. But, I also love music as a whole, and to, live, a life like that, blowing up. I mean, it's like, you got that term, I'll cry in my Ferrari. It's like it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's hard to say no, because you're still doing music, but I feel like once you have that power,
yeah,
you just do a few albums of music that you don't like, then you got the power to do whatever you want. I don't know if you're a Post Malone fan, but he does a lot of hip hop, and then now he has so much power and influence that he just put out a country album. So you could get through, the mainstream stuff, and then you could circle back to what you want to do. So I feel like it'd be weird, but I feel like I would take the route because I have a good example. So you got, there's that saying that no no press is bad press, or no publicity is bad publicity. So if you're releasing the music you want to release and it's not really kind of getting out to the mainstream, you're not going to have a whole lot of people listen to it.
Right.
Like, for example, Post Malone, and then you put out what the world wants to hear, and then suddenly you got billions of streams, millions or whatever, and you're as big as Taylor Swift. When you're as big as Taylor Swift, if you put out a fucking metal album, everybody's going to listen to it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost better for that specific genre if you just do a couple weird albums that'll get you fucking massive. And then guess what? If Taylor Swift put out a metal album, you know what that would do to the metal world? It would explode it. So it'd be a good thing for the, a lot of the metal fans would hate it, but it's like, you get what I'm saying though? It puts more eyes on it,
Well, yeah. And honestly, the way that I would answer that question, I'll be the first to tell you, I would do it in a second. That would be me. I would be, because then it gives you that power to do things. Although there have been some and maybe catastrophic failures of people doing that. I mean, I know you don't remember back in the day, but there was just some people that tried to change genres, and it didn't work out very well. One of the biggest ones was Pat Boone. Pat Boone, one of the biggest crooners of way back in the day, came out with a metal album, and it just did not work well at all. And even Dolly Parton now put out an album where she's doing other songs. And that I haven't seen that going over very well either. So I don't know, but
yeah, it's a hit or miss, but I think either way it draws attention to the other, it's like all those hip hop fans that like Post Malone, they all listen to that country album, and he had like 12 country artists on them, and if they like that song that Post did, then they'll go listen to that artist. For example, literally yesterday I saw a video of Taylor Swift. There was a viral clip of her at like a game or something like that, and her boyfriend Travis were singing along to the song by The Darkness called I Believe in a Thing Called Love, or is it is, or Love Is Only a Feeling, well, one of the two. And now that skyrocketed The Darkness to #1. That song is like up in the charts now because Taylor Swift was just singing it.
Right.
It does a lot. So there's a lot of power when it comes to that. Hey,
your video seems to have stopped.
Yeah, I'm looking at that right now. I don't know what that is. I don't want to refresh it, but it's like I could still hear. Oh, there we go.
There you are. Okay. There you are.
Okay.
No, now it froze again.
What the heck? I don't know, but I mean, you can still hear me.
Yeah, I can still hear you. That'll be fine. So, do you see yourself then going into the producing mode, or just continue to be a performer?
I love performing. I love that, but it's hard because I love both. I love the adrenaline that performing gives me.
Yeah,
there's nothing that could beat that, being on stage and with thousands of people. But I love making stuff. I love creativity. Before I wanted to do music, I wanted to get into movie making. I've taken directing classes, editing classes, acting lessons. I've done all of that. That's what I wanted to do before the music. And I love being creative. I used to get on my phone and I'd have like iMovie and I would make a bunch of things as a kid. I just love being creative. So I would do both. There's nothing that could beat that adrenaline of being on stage, but I love being creative in the studio.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to ask you one last question here before we go. And I know this is funny because it kind of trips up all the lead singers that I asked this question of. But I understand the situation. Right now, you have the greatest band that you could imagine. I know that. Your band is great. You love your band. But I'm going to ask you, as a lead singer of the band, if you could choose your ultimate band members. So let's say two guitar players, a bass player, and a drummer.
Yes.
Alive or dead, by the way. I'll give you that.
Okay. I got this.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Zach Wilde and Richie Sambora.
Oh,
Michael Anthony.
of course, on bass, yeah.
Drums is hard because I could probably go with Dave Grohl. You know,
Oh, okay.
it would add a unique style. You know, there's a few other drummers I'm trying to think of that are just so fucking great. Maybe even Tommy Lee. You know, people sleep on Tommy Lee. They just think he's, you know, oh, Motley Crue, they're not full of great musicians. Tommy Lee is a great drummer.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so
For sure.
I might say that might be my lineup.
Wow, great answers. That's really good. Yeah, I know I do have a lot of people that are like, well, I have the greatest band right now, and I don't want, you know, I get that. But, you know, it'd be interesting to see like what would be the perfect lineup, and would those musicians actually mesh together to do what it is you want to do to keep your sound. But I love that lineup. I think that's a great lineup.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think, you know, that you think of all the bands separate, they don't really sound that alike. But, you know, for Zach Wilde is my favorite guitar player of all time.
Mm-hmm.
He's an amazing metal guitar player, but he's got such soul in his fingers, you know, even when he shreds, but he has such a blues taste on it, but it's heavier blues.
Sure.
And you know, Richie Sambora's got a lot of that blues in him too. And I'm not we wouldn't make any blues music, but I'm talking about as much as feel. And Dave Grohl has a great pocket, but he's so heavy with the drums, and he's such a great songwriter too. I think Richie and Dave would be amazing songwriters together.
Yes.
And Michael, man, you know, when I think of a bass player, you know, you got to be a good bass player. You got to find that pocket in your rhythm, but you also got to be a good singer, man, because I look at a bass player as you got to help me with those background vocals.
Yes, one of the greatest harmony people you'll ever meet, Michael Anthony. Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. All right. Well, Gavin, where can people reach you? Where can people find your music?
Just, you know, find me, you know, on my social medias at Gavin Evick, or, you know, we got band pages too, Gavin Evick Band, anything like that. Our music's on all platforms. And just find me on any of those, Gavin Evick or Gavin Evick Band.
Very good. Well, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do this. It was a pleasure meeting you. And, you know, just knowing that you're doing what you're doing for music, certainly something that I appreciate, because it is something that I love and something that I want to do, being actually around in the 80s and enjoying the 80s and 90s style of music, and the 70s actually also.
Yeah.
You know, a great era of music. And, you know, thanks to you guys for keeping it alive and keeping it going, hopefully for many years to come. So thank you for joining us, and hang on with me for a bit after I end the recording. We'll go over a couple of more things. So
okay.
For everybody else, please look up Gavin Evick, and you know, the shows, check out his shows, check out his Facebook page, Spotify, YouTube, and get to know Gavin, because he will keep this music alive. So thank you for joining us. This is Living in the Limelight. I'm your host, Anton Scholl, and we will see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining our Living in the Limelight podcast with your host, Anton Scholl. Please feel free to comment, like, follow, share, and subscribe, and also add us to your playlist on your favorite streaming sites. Thanks again for joining, and we'll talk to you again next week.